You'll never be able to do very excellently if you Good morning, friends. I hope that your New Year's Eve went excellently and that you're excited for 2022. In this video, I'm going to give you 5 tips that I think may help you in case you're trying to keep some of your New Year's resolutions. But before I do, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already, like the video, and comment on the video to help the channel. Now let's get started. First of all, why you should listen to me. I've managed to change my behavior very dramatically several times in life, and doing so, I learned some tips and tricks that really helped me. Years later, through my study of psychology and biology, I learned the reasons that these skills that I learned on my own may have really helped me. In this video, I'm going to tell you about those skills that I know from personal experience really help. And before we get to the tips, we have to come to 2 realizations from psychology. One is about the basic principle of psychology, the basic theory of human learning called association theory. That implies that when we do some behavior, like you can think of Pavlov's dog, for example, when we do some behavior, that behavior gets connected to what else is in our human experience at the same time. So this is how, for example, the behavioral school developed in psychology through this association theory. But the association theory also drives, for example, neuroscience. That's why in neuroscience we say that neurons that fire together wire together. And the idea here is just that what your brain does at one moment, it connects with other things that are occurring in the brain or in your experience at that same moment. This is how behaviors get sticky and how habits begin, and also how, in some way, addictions develop. The second realization that we have to come to is that everything in our human experience influences our free will. Free will isn't as free as you may think. In fact, in the moment, our decisions are oftentimes not as conscious as we think. And our decision environment, called our choice architecture, influences our own choices, the decisions we take at any individual moment. And so there are 2 realizations we have to make. The first is that the basic of all our behavior is association. And the second is that everything in our environment is always influencing us to some degree. So what are the outcomes of these 2 empirical observations that we just made? Well, first of all, this explains why changing a lot about your life may be more effective than changing some small things at once. In particular, all of your experiences, your daily schedule right now, are associated with the behavior or whatever you want to change about yourself. Yourself has already associated all of that with a certain kind of behavior that is somehow connected to what you want to change. Because of this reason, if you change your life more completely, more suddenly, everything is a little bit easier to adapt to. Whereas if you keep all of your old behaviors in line and only change one thing, it's a little bit more difficult. I believe this is one of the reasons that people who have spiritual experiences that truly convince them of change oftentimes are the people who change the most. And it's probably just because they change the majority of their behavior at once. So the first thing we learn is that big changes may be more easy than small changes. And changing everything about your day may help you achieve your end goal of changing some certain behavior. Ideally, what you want is habits or patterns throughout the day that produce what is called in systems engineering a positive feedback loop. A positive feedback loop describes a situation where one kind of behavior or element of your day encourages another one, and then that other behavior, ideally your goal behavior, also makes the first behavior either more rewarding or more fruitful for you. So with positive feedback loops, you can have your daily schedule encouraging in a non-linear fashion over time the rewards that come from your new behavior. A second lesson that we can learn is that your environment, particularly your home environment, which you're under some control of, really influences your daily experience. Don't leave the salient features of your home environment alone. Change them so that they influence you to do what you want to do. So for example, if you wanted to work harder, you may not need a TV available. You may need some things to make it more difficult to do the behaviors that you want to avoid doing. And you may need some things around you that make it easier to do what you want to do. In fact, your environment can do 2 things. It can make it more difficult to do those other behaviors, and it can inspire you. Those are the 2 things that you can do. So you can write, for example, quotations that inspire you or images that inspire you around the wall in particular areas where you tend to be lax and not as disciplined. For example, in your work, for example, if you go and happen to relax on a couch, maybe next to that couch you have some inspirational images on your wall or something like that, but you can also not have the couch in the first place, so it's harder for you to relax. A third lesson that we can take here is that faking it until you make it may be more valuable than we realize and less fake, I suppose. In the sense that when we want to change, we oftentimes take simply the element of a person's behavior that we may want to imitate or learn from and try to apply that in our own life, whereas we don't know what's required to do that kind of behavior. So sometimes it's better to imitate another person, a historical figure or somebody that you know, their entire approach to life until you get the behaviors that you really want, and then you can remove certain aspects of their behavior and see if you're still able to accomplish those other behaviors. So faking it until you make it or imitating someone is really a path to learning how to do what they do, and then you can remove some of those elements of what you had borrowed from that person that you weren't sure whether they were useful or not. A fourth lesson that doesn't directly follow from those assumptions, but I found to be very useful, is to get yourself spiritually in the right frame of mind and get your mind, your stream of consciousness, your default mode network to be obsessing mainly about your goals. Not anxiously so, but about pleasurably how you can achieve those goals. In order to do this, I would highly recommend you do two things to cap and begin your day. You should end your day in bed before you try to fall asleep by visualizing yourself having accomplished those goals. This is really valuable because a lot of people, I believe, develop a lot of their progress overnight, and especially so when they end the day focusing on a problem that they couldn't solve. One way to imitate this is to just visualize yourself working through problems and achieving your goals every night. This will encourage you over the night to think about your goals and somehow develop a closer or more effective mindset toward achieving them. And by the way, the reason I thought of this is because I used to read a lot about the history of mathematics, and in reading biographies of mathematicians, I noted that a lot of them came up with their amazing solutions, brilliant, supposedly genius solutions to problems while asleep. They would think about a problem before sleeping and sometimes wake up to the solution. And I tried to imitate this in some small way in my life just by thinking about what I'm trying to do, envisioning myself accomplishing it before I slept, and I found that in those periods in which I did that, I accomplished a lot more than I regularly did. Can't be completely sure how exactly effective this is, but I'm quite sure it was effective. And then after ending your day envisioning yourself getting through the tasks that you need and getting toward your goals, I would suggest beginning every day with a prayer. Even if you're not that spiritual or believe in God, you can think of it as meditation. Meditating on your goals and sort of praying to the universe, asking for the universe to recognize your goal and help you get towards it. I think this develops a very positive, rewarding relationship with the universe, such that you don't look toward the goal antagonistically, or the universe. You don't look at it as putting obstacles toward you, because you'll start to, just by praying, believing in some way, having faith that the universe will get you toward your goals, which I think is very important in your progress. And finally, before we end, the fifth lesson: have a schedule and try to stick to it. In particular, try to have your daily patterns to be as similar across the days of the week as they can be. The more scheduled you will be, the more rigorously you follow your schedule, and the more consistent your schedule is, the more productive you will be over time. Humans do not do well at all with inconsistent schedules. It has significant effects on your circadian rhythms and the way your spirit and your brain functions in general. You'll never be able to do very excellently if you have an inconsistent schedule. Now, some people may do well having a schedule where they work late in the day. They don't wake up early. Most people will not do well this way. In fact, particularly myself, I really dislike waking up late. It makes me completely unproductive. Some people will be able to get around that, but nobody will be able to get around an inconsistent schedule. That is going to harm almost everyone. Moreover, once you have your schedule, in the morning you should know what your goals are for every day. You should have a period after maybe your prayer where you go through your goals for the day. And at the end of the day, even more importantly, you should review what you accomplished. Feedback is the most important element in getting better over time. If you don't recognize your mistakes, if they're not salient to you in your day and you don't think about them, not in a self-critical, like poor self-talk kind of way, but just recognizing at the end of the day that you didn't accomplish the goals you set to, understanding why, and doing better the next day. This is the reason, feedback is the reason, for example, weathermen are so good at predicting the weather. It's whenever they don't do it, they hear from everybody that day that it actually did rain. You were wrong. So that salience really keeps you learning over time. There's some subconscious effects. So I suggest every day you begin your day reviewing your goals and end your day noting which goals you didn't accomplish in some kind of diary that's with your schedule. Anyway, friends, I hope these 5 tips were useful for you. To review them, changing everything may be better than changing one thing at once. Changing your living space, making things in your living space more or less salient, to either make things more difficult or easy for you or to inspire you, is also very valuable. Finding somebody to imitate, in particular applying what's called the fake it till you make it approach, may be valuable because of the reasons that the first tip is valuable. And I suggest finding a role model around you that you can imitate, faking it until you make it, in order to develop the massive changes in behavior that you probably seek. And fourth, treat your spirit well. Begin every day with prayer towards your goals and end every day visualizing your work or your goals before you sleep, taking advantage of your sleep. And finally, develop as consistent of a daily schedule as you can and begin every day with clearly outlining your goals for that day in written form and ending every day with an inventory of what you did and didn't do so that you can get better for the next day. Anyway, I hope you try these 5 approaches. They really worked for me. They added some value significantly in my own life. Remember, I'm not very talented. Most of the obstacles or goals that I had to face, I was not very capable to defeat. So I had to try harder than other people. And this is how I learned these sort of skills over time to try to get more out of myself because I was working with less. So hopefully these skills, especially for you younger folks, can really get you to levels that you wouldn't have expected. Anyway, friends, I wish you a great first day of the year and I'll see you this afternoon.